colonial politics. And this, friends, is the really important part of how our revolution is successful. So in my other U.S. history class, my dual credit U.S. history class, they're in this big giant review, and they're getting ready to start on the Constitution. And again, it is difficult for you to understand because we know that we win and we know that we're successful. But that is not the case for most European powers. Those of you that have watched and adore Hamilton, when King George says, "You'll be back," they strongly, truly, 100% believe that we would not be successful in this revolution. Not that we wouldn't win, but that we wouldn't know how to govern ourselves, that we wouldn't be able to watch ourselves grow into this democracy. The reason we were able to is what we're going to look at the bottom of page 7, that we had some kind of practice, that the colonies, while they were on their own, while Great Britain's focus was somewhere else, we developed these forms of democracy that allowed us to run ourselves. So we have three types.
Excuse the interruption. Can I have all the seniors please report to the auditorium? Thank you.
So we have 3 types of colonies. Royal colonies, there are 8 of those. Royal governors appointed by the crown. That's going to be the sticking point when we start with this revolution, that these royal governors appointed by the crown, a lot of them don't even come. They stay in England. They collect money, and that will begin some of the issues that we'll have with Parliament. The next one are proprietary. That is colonies led by proprietors. A proprietor is someone that owns something. So these colonies are owned by, and it should not be hard to come up with, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. All of that, Maryland and Delaware, were all part of Pennsylvania. William Penn owned that land. That was land that they owned. He's a proprietor. And then the other ones are charter countries, Connecticut, or colonies. Connecticut and Rhode Island elected their own governors. And again, it shouldn't be lost on you. Connecticut had those fundamental orders. And then Rhode Island, again, just because Rhode Island is always weird and will always be weird. And they had self-governing charters. And again, some of these other colonies had charters, but the king revoked them and would take them back. So on page 8, we begin this look at developing governments. And we have a couple of terms that are important. And that term bicameral. Bi means 2, like a bicycle with 2 wheels. Cameral is just the idea of government. And the United States government is bicameral. We have an upper house and a lower house. And most every state government except the state of Nebraska is bicameral. Upper, lower, Nebraska just has one. I don't know why. It's unicameral. Upper house or council, normally appointed by the crown. And then the lower house is elected by property owners. Again, you had to have property to be elected, not necessarily to vote. But again, if you think about that in the United States, in the colonies, lots of people had the option for property, to own property. That's really important. Voted for taxes, to pay expenses in the colonial government. So we already have a developing history of electing officials, having officials represent people, and this idea of taxing. Nature of our politics, they don't enjoy the power that Parliament enjoyed. And that C1 is going to become the sticking point. Not yet. And this is what we need to think about. I try really hard to give you analogies. And this really is, when we talk about England being the mother country, it really is a parent-child relationship. This time in the colonies, you're a little bitty kid. You listen to everything you should always listen to everything your parents say. But when you're a little bitty kid, it's a lot easier to follow the rules. You don't question, why do you do that? Because mom said so. But as you begin to develop, and it is part of your parents' job to make you think for yourself and make good choices and all those things, and as you start to come up against some of the things that they think is important versus what you think is important, like, and we found this out last year in my ACT class about people having to make their bed. Like, how many of you actually have to make your bed in the morning? Okay, so that was the same thing in my ACT class. Like, the Dugan kids were the only ones in my whole ACT class that had to make their beds, and they were like, what the heck? I always had to make my bed. Now, if we were doing, stop, Scott. If we were, Scott, there's a button. No, let me get hang on. This is for you, Scott. Where's my button?
No.
There we go.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Okay. Forgot I had that. There we go. So, I know, isn't it? There we go. So just for reference sake, if we did this in my high school and raised the hand of everybody that had to make the bed, I would say 3/4 of us would have our hand raised. Not only did I have to make my bed, but it was inspected. Like, my dad would come by and make sure it was made properly. And this is what I say anytime people want to think that I'm crazy. You don't understand. Like, I could be so much crazier than I am if you only knew. But at certain points, you start to think for yourself and make your own choices. And that's what happens with the colonies. In the beginning, we're kind of afraid. We don't know what we're doing. Yes, we're Englishmen. But as we develop and grow, we start to push that. And that will be, we don't enjoy the power that Parliament enjoys. They don't have the same. And eventually, we will say, why don't we? Either let our assemblies have the same power, or let us elect people to represent us in Parliament. And that will be, again, where we're headed. Colonial government, far more reformed than those in England. Much more direct representation and less corruption. So that, again, is an important part that the colonists will see, that the House in are much less corrupt. New England has town hall, South House county government, and middle colonies have a whole bunch of the above. Please look at, on that page, number 4, voting restrictions. And this will be really important. The upper class opposed democracy, did not trust the common man. And that's going to be an overwhelming belief, even after the Revolution and even after we write the Constitution. Hence, we have this thing called the Electoral College, bless you, where the popular vote does not elect a president. And it's because the people that wrote the Constitution said, yikes, we don't think these people are smart enough. They might get convinced by some flim-flam man, and mob rule will take over. So let's just have this thing called the Electoral College, which, again, we still have. And we will see many people say, don't trust common man. Don't trust him. Don't trust him. A whole lot of founding fathers, I think almost all of them, said common people should not have the right to vote. We are not going to get to this idea of the common man until Andrew Jackson, who definitely was not a common man, but he promoted himself in that way. So there was a fear of mob rule. Rightly so. Shays' Rebellion, Bacon's Rebellion, Lisler's Rebellion, all of those rebellions are always in the back of these people's head, that these poor people who don't understand get too much power, and we can't trust them. Property and or religious qualifications are imposed, and I hope that religious qualification kind of surprises you. That will be something for a long period of time, which is why we have that part in our Constitution that the government cannot express a favorite religion. As much as 50% of white males are disenfranchised. That word disenfranchised means you can't vote. Now, I have that as a negative, but as a positive would be 50% can. And that is way more than anywhere else. Way, way more. In England, probably about 2% of the population could vote. So we're talking 50% have the ability to vote in the colonies at this time. All right, our governors, legal power, authority to exercise veto power over colonial legislation, and that is powerful. Veto means a stamp saying, nope, not going to do it, not having it. veto power in the Constitution is over. The president can veto a bill in a couple of different ways, but if it goes back and there's a 2/3 majority, then the bill overrides the veto. That's why when there are certain bills that are passed by both the House and the Congress, like in the Senate, if it passes 99-1, it's a bill because the president can't override that veto. What a veto by a governor means that he can override without any recourse. Like if the president vetoes a bill, it goes back and starts the process all over again, and it could eventually become a bill. But when a governor has total veto, that's tremendous, tremendous power. All of you know, if you live with two parents or you have to ask two parents anything, the one that you always go to first. All of us know that. You have that parent because the other one is the veto, right? The other one is the stopper. You don't ever go there first. You don't ever go to that one first because you know that's the ultimate stop. That's what this governor is, stop. And how many of you have two of those parents? That'd be me. That'd be me. Both of them. Both of them. My parents. And I don't know that I've ever told you that story about when my mom was trying to always talk about how good we were when we were kids. And finally, like 10 years ago, we said, Mom, it was because we were afraid. And then she burst out in tears. You were afraid of me? Like, how could we not? Like you bought children's toys and ripped them apart so you could use the paddle part to spank us with. Like, how could we not be afraid? You know, those paddle balls? My mom would buy those and rip the ball off because that was her new paddle. Because my mom was little, so she had to have some force behind her, but yeah. So, had power to dissolve the lower houses. So the governor can also say, all of you just go home. You're dissolved. Again, a tremendous amount of power. Had power over the judiciary, and the judiciary is a court system. For those of you that don't know what that word means, judiciary means court system. But they were also weak. They were weak in the sense, and only really weak in the sense of 2A. They controlled the governor's salary. So they could hold the governor's salary. And again, some of those governors won't get paid for years as, oh, yes. Hello? Hey. Yes. No, I did not take them. That whole package? They ate your food? Okay. Uh-huh. Well, not me. You know, I don't think, you know, Mr. O'Brien, I do not take things. And I'm going to say to you right now, if they're gone, it serves you right. You are Finnegan in Oliver Twist, corrupting the minds of youth. Yes, steal for me. I want you to think about how that sounds. Go in Mrs. Norris's room and take things. Oh, right. You don't tell people that. So just desserts, with my pun, just desserts that your ding-a-ding-alongs or whatever they are got eaten. So there you go. Have a great day, Mr. O'Brien. Uh-huh. Yeah. He thinks that the construction workers ate them.
I bet they did. Did you see all the tape in his room?
I did. I did. I did. And as I said in my lovely pun, it's just desserts if someone did eat all of your ring-a-ling-a-ding-dongs.
If there was any little dent on those cabinets, he put it.
Oh, they were bad, though. They were bad. They were bad.
I went and pulled up from home because I was curious. And he was like, yeah,
Yes.
that's fine.
What time do we get out? I got to make sure because we have our quiz. All right. So, page 9. Please put box around page 9E, Development of Democratic Ideals in Colonial America. Oh gosh, Finn and Damon, pardon the phone conversation. Yeah, it's an ongoing thing. It's always an ongoing thing. Hey, Scott.
Out of David and Finn, who got the higher test score?
I don't know
Like,
that
ones
either
for
one
David
of
Boyd.
them had the highest test scores as we're talking out loud. You mean the highest test score just between the two of them? I'm not going to say that.
No, like once for David, twice for Finn.
I'm not.
It's like,
No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Just so that you know, though, I don't blink.
dang,
Um,
I thought authorized theories were gonna come from.
one,
Did they both
never
get
mind.
stickers?
What?
They both had to get stickers, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Okay, on page 9, as we not talk about classmates that aren't here. Page 9, development of democratic ideals in colonial America. Democratic ideal of tolerance. So the first one will be tolerance. You cannot have a democracy without tolerance, right? Because we're not all the same. And democracy means we all are treated as close to equal as we can. And again, the democratic idea of tolerance emerges, right? It's not anything remotely like we think of as far as tolerance in our present time. The other really, really important part of democracy is education. Without education, democracy does not survive. Equality of opportunity, incredibly important. That everyone has an equal opportunity. Freedom of speech and the press, freedom of assembly, and last, a representative government. Now, of course, in this time period, it is nowhere close to being a representative government because only a certain group of people are represented. But again, as we say this, it's more than any other place on earth. So when we talk about our colonies and eventually our new nation being democratic and moving toward these democratic ideals, it should always be in the context of the time period of which it existed, right? So if we lay these things out and look at these ideas in the 21st century, that the colonies, it in no way holds weight that, yeah, you weren't that tolerant. But if we think about in the context, and that word is really important in history, in the context of the time of which these 6 things occurred, it was more than any other place in the world. And to be living in the colonies at this time and having this small amount of tolerance, a freedom of speech and press, a right to assemble was something that was guaranteed to you nowhere else. And it is, again, significantly important. So we got to talk about where we got these ideas from. Because my AP Euro people certainly know and understand that Age of Enlightenment. Did a whole dang chapter on it. Did we do the salon? We did. Did we do that? Yeah, we did a whole speed dating on this thing.
We did the TikTok.
Oh, you did TikToks. Okay. You just did the TikToks because we couldn't do. So the Age of Enlightenment is really important in the history of Europe, but it is much more important in the history of the United States. Because what we think about in France, where this is established, is it is a whole lot of people talking. So all of these people that we know the names of, all they did was talk. Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it. The colonists put these ideas into action. And that's really important. They put these into action. So this idea of classical liberalism, and this is liberalism with a capital L. This isn't being a liberal or a conservative. This is the definition of liberalism. And if you look at the definition of liberalism, it's hard to not think that all of these, both liberals and conservatives, fit into that. And the most important part of classic liberalism should not be lost on that word liberty. The idea of individual human rights, that human beings, just because they exist, have certain rights. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to be a part of anything. John Locke says just because you exist, you have the right to life, liberty, and property. Thomas Jefferson changes it because we don't want everybody to have property in these new places. And those freedoms are basic. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, fair and equal treatment. That's classical liberalism. And if we think about that, that is the foundation of America, whether you're liberal or conservative. Everybody in the United States of America is a classical liberalist because we all believe those things. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, free and equal treatment. That's across every political realm. Equality, all citizens should have identical rights and civil liberties. Above all, nobility had no right to special privileges. That's John Locke. Doesn't matter. Just because you're born, you get the same. Human dignity and happiness. That's what Thomas Jefferson changes that up. So he hides his plagiaristic ideals. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is what he will change it to. Science, progress, rationality, liberal principles would lead government. You educate your people, you give them the ability to think rationally, everything's going to be so much better. Progress only comes when all of these things happen. And most importantly, representative governments, not a democracy, only those who owned property and had a stake in society. And that was a strong belief. That's a very strong belief. Now, we can see it in a positive environment when we think about things like Habitat for Humanity. One of the reasons Habitat for Humanity exists is that reason, that if you own something, you have a larger stake in your community and your surrounding. So there are entire charitable organizations revolved around allowing people to own homes that they possibly could never do because it makes for a better community. If we take a ride down Section Street, pretty much we could pick out the homes that are owned by people. Not Section Street, what's the next one over? Court. Is it Court or Main? Whichever one, Court or Main. We drive down that, I'm sure all of us could pick out the homes that are owned by the people living there or the homes that are rented. It's just a thing, right? You rent something, it's not mine, I don't really care what it looks like, it's not mine, versus this is mine and I need to take care of it. And that's, again, what the representative government said. Why should we put people in there that don't have a stake? You don't own property, and that will be the case for a long period of time. It isn't democracy, but it is representative. So at the bottom of page 9, we got our thinkers. And again, you have to know these names and you have to associate them with these thoughts because we're going to hang on to these guys for a really long period of time. So in the study of European history, we study the Enlightenment in depth, but nothing really happens or changes in Europe because of the Enlightenment, except about 5 years of the French Revolution, that at the end it goes back to the way it was. In the United States, we take the ideas of Enlightenment and make them really happen. This isn't just talk in a French salon. This is real life, that these people take these really forward-thinking ideas and make a country based on them. So John Locke, that natural rights, the right to rebellion, and this is always the part that cracks me up, because Thomas Jefferson is a fanboy, if that's a word, of John Locke. He is all about John Locke, but he doesn't want to act like he knows him. But one of the most important things that Thomas Jefferson's going to say that makes him very much a radical and a rebel is we should have rebellion every 10 years. In the writing of the Constitution, he thought every 10 years we should do it again. Like the blood should spill every 10 years because we should all rise up and rebel every 10 years. That's his belief until he becomes president. And then he kind of rethinks all that, like, oh, wait a minute, no, let me change my mind. But he truly believes that. He believes that because that's what John Locke says. John Locke says if your government is not representing you or denies you your liberty, you have a right to rebel. Not only a right, but a responsibility to overthrow that government and create a new one. That is John Locke. And that was Thomas Jefferson until he became president. And then he kind of like, oh no, let me reel that back in. That's a little bit too radical. Baron Montesquieu, our entire government is based on Montesquieu. This idea of checks and balances, separation of powers, 3 branches, everything about our government is based on Montesquieu and the spirit of laws. And then Adam Smith, the granddaddy of all economic thinkers and writers. His book is still the book on capitalism, The Wealth of Nations, in 1776. You can find that book everywhere. it is still the book of capitalism. Most significant work on capitalism ever written. Throw in Buffett, throw in Gates, throw in anybody. Nobody's ever written a book better on capitalism and understanding capitalism than Adam Smith. Formulated idea of a free economy, contrasted mercantilism. He hates mercantilism. Please make sure you get that in your head. Adam Smith hates mercantilism. The opposite of mercantilism is capitalism, right? A free economy, private enterprise. It would make everything better for everybody. And then our last thing we're going to talk about on the top of page 10 is one of the things that everybody doesn't like to talk about because we like to make the founding fathers these ideals of a Christian society. All of our founding fathers were deists. All of them. Now, deism is Christians, but deists think really different. God created the universe, step back, and it runs like a clock. They did not strongly believe in this idea of a personal relationship with God, the idea of prayer. They rejected traditional Christianity, the divinity of Jesus, all of those things. And this is how you know, because people, now that we have the internet, like to throw around quotes from all these people. And this is how you can always tell if anything coming from these founding fathers is true or not, because lots of people like to attribute prayer to George Washington. If there is ever the word God in any of those prayers, it has been retooled, because they would use the word providence. Because providence is this idea of providence, the great creator, you made all this, now we got to make it work. So that's how you know if there's a quote on George Washington, like really praying, he would say providence. And if you've seen that word, and you should have seen that word a lot if you've read real things, that's God, providence. They, again, influenced Jefferson, Franklin, Washington, Thomas Paine. Everyone was what was considered a deist. They were Christians. They were religious. But if you look at this, it is the idea that we are in control. And the idea of that is providence, that we make our way, that God created everything. He made everything magnificent. He created everything in his vision, and I did it perfect, and I don't need to do anything else. I'm just going to watch. And you men in the world make it work right. That's deism. And please, again, make sure it is not denying their Christianity or any of those things, because obviously they were, but not in the sense, I think, that it has manifested itself. All right, on page 10 and 11, you got a giant timeline of democratic developments. Make sure, and some of these obviously we're going to look at in further chapters, like the Paxton Boys and Salutary Neglect, Great Awakening, Enlightenment, but make sure you know all of those things. All right? So let me look and see what the secret code word, and keep listening, guys, for when I tell you the secret code word. Secret code word is colonies. Lowercase, I'll write it. Lowercase c. It's chapter 5 quiz.
So did you give me the
Do what?
you give me a 0 normally? For my tag and
I just made absent.
Oh, okay.
So that, yes,
Okay.
yes.
This is on lockdown browser.
Is it what? It is on the lockdown browser, but you shouldn't have to do anything with this one. You still, because the app is internal, so now you should just still be able to go to the quiz. Like in our Macs, you had to click the little globe. You should still now just be able to click the quiz, and it should just open in lockdown browser. Pretty sure. And now I should stop recording.